When two fake HOA officers showed up to fine her for improper landscaping, Emily had no idea this day would change everything. They thought she'd back down, but she was more than just a homeowner. She was the head of the HOA. What happened next would leave even the most seasoned manipulators speechless. But let's start from the beginning. It was a picture-perfect Saturday morning when Emily was in her garden, carefully trimming the roses she had tended to for years. The sun shone brightly, the air was crisp with the first hints of fall, and everything seemed peaceful, serene. The soft hum of the neighborhood was the only sound breaking the quiet. But then, that peace was shattered. A car rolled into her driveway, bearing the unmistakable insignia of the HOA. Two figures emerged from the vehicle, both wearing dark uniforms that contrasted sharply with the warmth of the day. Their expressions were rigid, their posture stiff, like two soldiers arriving for battle. "We're here to issue a fine," one of them said, her tone sharp and authoritative. Emily's gaze followed the officer's pointed finger, landing on her roses, a patch of vibrant red and pink that had always been the pride of her garden. "It doesn't meet HOA guidelines." Emily froze. She glanced down at her garden in disbelief. For years, it had been admired by neighbors, featured in the community's newsletter, even praised at the annual spring fair. The roses had always been her pride, her quiet rebellion against the harsh uniformity the HOA often imposed. Now, this? "What do you mean, it doesn't meet the guidelines?" Emily's voice was steady, but inside her mind raced. "I've followed everything to the letter." Officer Hall, the one who spoke first, stepped closer, her eyes cold as she looked over the garden with barely concealed disdain. "The rules are clear. No overgrown plants. You'll need to remove these roses immediately." Emily's stomach tightened. Anger boiled up inside her, but she held her ground, her face calm, her hands steady. She knew exactly what this was about. It wasn't just the garden. It was her. It was power. What they didn't know was that Emily wasn't just another homeowner. She was the president of the Homeowners Association. As Emily tried to reason with them, Officer Hall, without a word, began flipping through her tablet. She paused for a moment, then presented a digital copy of the HOA's supposed complaint. Her finger tapped against the screen, pointing at the image with clinical precision. "These roses exceed the height limit set by the association," Hall announced coldly, her voice unwavering. "This fine is non-negotiable." The words hit Emily like a slap to the face. It wasn't just about the fine. It was the sheer audacity of these imposters, standing on her property, trying to push their fabricated rules on her. Emily's mind spun as she considered her next move. She had seen these two before. They weren't real officers. She had seen them loitering around the neighborhood, making trouble, claiming to enforce the HOA's rules. But Emily knew the truth. They had no authority. She felt a rush of frustration and indignation flood her veins. Her heart pounded in her chest as she clenched her fists, her eyes narrowing. These people had crossed a line, and they had no idea who they were dealing with. "Really?" Emily's voice dropped low, sharp with venom. "You're not real HOA cops, are you?" The younger officer, Alex, shifted uncomfortably, his face faltering for a brief moment. He looked at Hall, then back at Emily, trying to maintain a semblance of confidence. "What do you mean?" he asked, though the uncertainty was clear in his voice. A small, knowing smile tugged at the corners of Emily's lips. She leaned in, her eyes cold, her tone slow and deliberate, like a predator toying with its prey. "I'm the head of the HOA," she said, every word slicing through the tension. "You don't get to come here and make up rules as you go. This is my turf." The shift in the air was palpable. For a moment, neither officer moved. The false authority they'd tried to wield now hung in the air, deflating in the face of Emily's calm but undeniable power. The game had changed, and they knew it. Officer Hall and Alex's faces drained of color as the realization hit them. This was no ordinary homeowner. They had underestimated Emily, and now the weight of their mistake was crashing down on them. Their self-assured postures faltered as they glanced nervously at each other, suddenly aware that they were standing on dangerous ground. Emily could see the panic creeping into their eyes, but she didn't care. She was done with their game. She had fought for years to build the neighborhood into what it was, a safe, respectful place for everyone. She wasn't about to let a couple of fake enforcers tear that down. "You two are impersonating officers," she said, her voice growing stronger, each word more deliberate than the last. The quiet fury in her tone sent a clear message. They had messed with the wrong person. "And you have no right to fine me or anyone else. If you think you can come in here and push me around, you're in for a big surprise." Her words cut through the tension like a knife. The two officers stammered, trying to regain some control of the situation. Their hands fumbled with the tablet, as if it would somehow give them the power they had just lost. We were just following orders," Alex mumbled, but the weak excuse only made him look more foolish. Emily's gaze never wavered as she calmly pulled her phone from her pocket, the gravity of the moment settling in. She wasn't interested in their excuses. She wasn't interested in anything they had to say. Emily's fingers tapped across the screen, dialing the real HOA's legal team without hesitation. She knew the consequences of their actions all too well. Impersonating officers was a serious crime, and she wasn't about to let them get away with it. Her voice was steady as she spoke into the phone, her attention never leaving the two officers. "Yes, this is Emily Davis. I have two individuals here claiming to be HOA officers, and I need immediate legal action. They're imposters." The air seemed to crackle with tension as Emily stood firm, her resolve unshakable. She knew this wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever came next. The real HOA representatives arrived within the hour, and it was clear from the moment they stepped out of their vehicles that Emily's instincts had been right. The sharp, professional demeanor of the real officers was in stark contrast to the flustered expressions of Officer Hall and Alex, who now stood nervously at the foot of her driveway. It didn't take long for the legal team to confirm the truth. Hall and Alex were nothing more than frauds. Their facade of authority crumbled as the HOA team explained how these imposters had been targeting homeowners, using the guise of official enforcement to extort money from unsuspecting residents. Emily's jaw tightened, but she held back her anger, knowing that the wheels of justice were already in motion. The legal team acted swiftly, their voices firm and no-nonsense as they demanded that the fake officers leave immediately. Hall and Alex tried to protest, their voices weak and desperate, but their fate had already been sealed. One of the real officers stepped forward, presenting them with the evidence of their crime: fraud, identity theft, and harassment. Within minutes, they were escorted off the property, the gravity of their situation sinking in. As they were led to a police car, Emily watched them, her posture tall and resolute. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence spoke volumes. Justice had been served. The imposters, who had dared to threaten her garden, her home, and her community, were finally being held accountable. With a subtle smile playing at the corners of her lips, Emily turned to face her garden. It was undisturbed, untouched by the chaos that had tried to invade it. The vibrant roses, the neat hedges, everything was just as it had been. Her sanctuary was safe, and her reputation was intact. For once, the law had worked in her favor. Today, the battlefield had been her garden, and against all odds, she had emerged victorious.